Welcome to our channel 10 Minutes Shorts, where we delve into the world of international trade and commerce. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the export of salmon from Norway to Japan. From the initial stages of sourcing and packaging to navigating customs regulations and finding the right market, we'll explore the challenges and opportunities of this trade route. Whether you're a business owner, a student of international trade, or simply curious about global commerce, tune in now to learn more about the export of salmon from Norway to Japan and how it's done. Let's begin with some history. Chapter 1. 20 years ago, eating raw salmon in Japan was unheard of. On the other hand, a handful of forward-thinking individuals in Norway successfully convinced the Japanese to give it a shot. Since then, Norwegian sushi salmon has become a phenomenon that is recognized all over the world. Suppose you go to a typical Japanese restaurant and order various sushi. In that case, you will most likely be presented with a tiny wooden plate on which 10 or 12 pieces of fish, such as tuna, mackerel, squid, octopus, sea urchin, and salmon, have been laid on top of rice. The consumption of sea urchins will undoubtedly leave a favorable impression on your Japanese companions. Then you should watch while your Japanese friends consume the salmon, while pretending to be just as impressed as they are. Why? Chapter 2. Even though the Japanese have been known to consume raw fish for hundreds of years, the salmon that is often presented on practically every sushi platter today, both in Japan and internationally, would have been outside the choices 20 years ago. This is because salmon has yet to be widely available, because locally caught salmon from the Pacific was thought to contain parasites and was too skinny to be used for sushi. The Japanese did not customarily eat raw salmon. The Japanese only consumed salmon in cooked and preserved forms. It was never eaten fresh. It was a combination of strategic analysis, unbridled confidence, and innovative technological advancements that led to the introduction of salmon into Japanese eateries. You'll be astounded to learn that Japan had a self-sufficient fish sector 40 years ago. It produced approximately 7 million metric tons of seafood and consumed approximately 60 kilograms per capita per year, significantly more than the global average of 15 kilograms. Despite this, the Asian country had a fish surplus and was a net exporter of marine products. Chapter 3. The collapse of Japanese fisheries. The situation had drastically shifted by the middle of the 1990s. Because it was only self-sufficient to a level of 50%, Japan needed additional suppliers to meet the enormous demand within the country. According to Bjørn Erik Olsen, head of the Norwegian Institute of Food, Fisheries, and Aquaculture Research, NOFIMA, and a former fish attaché to the Norwegian embassy in Japan, there were various factors to blame for the collapse of the Japanese fisheries. According to Olsen, the two most significant factors that contributed to the decline were that Japan was overfishing its stocks, partly because it does not have a quota system, and the fact that it had been kicked out of the fishing zones of other countries. There were also natural variables associated with Japan's intricate ocean system that negatively impacted the country's fishing stocks. Now let's have a look at the Japan project. Project Japan. The Japanese market would be a natural fit for Norwegian seafood. Thor Listo, a Norwegian member of the Parliamentary Shipping and Fisheries Committee, was initially inspired by the concept of selling Norwegian fish to the Japanese, following a trade delegation visit to Japan in 1974. The trip took place in 1974. This journey was planned to strengthen the bond of friendship between the two countries. In 1985, as Listow's tenure as the Norwegian Minister of Fisheries was closing, he decided to take a trip back to his native Japan. Nearly 20 individuals representing Norwegian seafood exporters, ministries, and organizations were part of the seafood delegation he brought along with him. When he returned to Norway, he launched a new government program that he termed Project Japan to boost the Norwegian fish business in Japan. The initial objective was to increase the volume and value of their exports to Japan while simultaneously expanding the market for all varieties of Norwegian fish, with a special emphasis on capelin. At the time, Norway shipped seafood products worth about 500 million Norwegian krone to Japan, making up about 7% of its overall seafood exports and 1% of Japan's total imports. This value had increased to 1.8 billion Norwegian kroner by the year 1991. Olsen explained that it's not solely because of Project Japan, but it opened opportunities. It forced Norwegian exporters to concentrate on Japan. Keep in mind that people in Japan were not used to eating raw salmon before the experiment, so it greatly affected how they cooked. Tuna and sea bream were highly prized for their use in preparing sushi and sashimi. Grilled salmon and gourmet, a dish of gently salted and dried fish, were both made with salmon. Because Pacific salmon were caught in the wild, they were more likely to be infected with parasites than other fish, making them unsuitable for use in sushi due to their low-fat content. Additionally, domestic distributors of tuna were quite protectionist in their business practices. Olsen, who was also in charge of doing market research for Project Japan from 1986 to 1991, said that everyone had told him that Japanese people do not eat raw salmon. To get salmon on the market, we had to put up a serious struggle. It was in 1995 that Japan became the first country in the world to legalize the consumption of raw salmon. This milestone came 15 years after the first salmon was exported to the country in 1980. Chapter 4. Now let's have a look at Best Norwegian Invention. According to Arne Schultens, chief executive at digital advertising agency Kruna in Oslo, convincing the Japanese to place salmon on a lump of rice is one of Norway's greatest export triumphs in the last 20 years, even a better invention than the Norwegian cheese slicer. Schultens made these statements after speaking with Japanese consumers. He has been employed in the seafood sector for the past 5 years, with the last 3 spent working in Hong Kong for the Norwegian Seafood Export Council. He claimed that throughout the years he spent working with seafood, people were always astounded whenever he told them the story about Project Japan. The Norwegian Seafood Export Council will have access to the television program in its original language and English. The Norwegian government, the fishing industry, and various NGOs invested a combined total of 30 million Norwegian kroner in the initiative known as Project Japan. In addition to individual initiatives, general campaigns aimed at importers, wholesalers, supermarket chains, retailers, and restaurants were carried out with the raised monies. According to Chiltons, the objective of Project Japan was to have it included in the finest hotels and restaurants. The Norwegian ambassador served fish to each visitor as they rapped on doors. As a direct consequence of this development, Norway increased the quantity of seafood it shipped to Japan by a factor of 250 between 1980 and 1994. In 1980, Norway exported almost no salmon to Japan. In 1995, the country exported 28,000 metric tons of salmon and trout, of which 5,000 to 6,000 tons were consumed raw. Continue watching as we dive into the story of the Norwegian salmon export to Japan, an unlikely success story that saw sales soar from a small fraction to 28,000 metric tons in just 15 years. Discover the economic factors that contributed to this growth and learn how Norway's strategy and efforts played a key role in this fishy business. The interesting thing is that sales of Norwegian salmon to Japan grew from virtually nothing in 1980 to about 28,000 metric tons in 1995. Many economic circumstances that worked in Norway's favor contributed to the project's success, which can partly be attributed to their contributions. Between 1960 and 1995, Japan's population climbed from 93 million to 122 million. Real purchasing power doubled, and the country's seafood consumption rose from 5 million to 9 million metric tons, from 53 to 73 kilograms per capita. At the same time, the fisheries industry in Japan was experiencing a decline, and rising prices were seen in the seafood market. According to Olsen, every good endeavor has a portion of luck. In terms of time, we were fortunate. The fish market in Japan was excellent. Not only did Project Japan pave the path for eating raw Atlantic salmon in Japan, but it also prepared the way for the establishment of salmon sushi markets in China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. China acquired more Norwegian salmon than Japan did the previous year. 80 to 90% of the salmon exported from Norway to China is consumed uncooked. It's time to discuss the facts. A traditional Japanese dish consisting of cooked rice, seasoned with vinegar and other seasonings, or nida. Although sushi has several nice presentation styles, sherry is the basic component of all sushi. Foods made from fish and shellfish are the most typical nida. Sashimi refers to thinly sliced, uncooked beef that is typically served on its own. In conclusion, exporting salmon from Norway to Japan is a complex process, such that involves a variety of factors, including sourcing, packaging, logistics, and compliance with customs regulations. The challenges and opportunities that come with this trade route can be unique and varied. However, with the right planning, research, and understanding of the market and cultural differences, exporting salmon to Japan can be a successful endeavor. The export of salmon from Norway to Japan is a great example of how international trade can be beneficial for both parties and foster cultural exchange. We hope that this information was valuable to you and that you have a better understanding of the nuances of this trade route. Thanks for tuning in. And if you found this information interesting and want to learn more about international trade, be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our latest content. Also, please don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and colleagues who may find it beneficial as well. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more informative and interesting content in the future.